Well, good evening again to everybody. I want to thank you all for coming to the taping of Shorsharet's Roundtable discussion. My name is Shara Dubitsky, and I am the clinical supervisor at Shorsharet. We appreciate all of you, again, who have weathered the storm to join us in person. Again, we want to welcome those of you who are listening from all across the country, who are comfortably sitting in your home, perhaps enjoying a meal, as we are here as well. I would like to begin by thanking the Jewish Women's Foundation of New York for their generous grant and for their recognition that while advances in medical technology mean that Jewish women may have a better chance of physically surviving serious illness, the overwhelming financial issues associated with treatment and recovery could be devastating to their financial health, particularly during these challenging times. For those of you who are not familiar with Shorsharet, Shorsharet is the Hebrew name for chain, and we are a national non-for-profit organization supporting young women and their families of all Jewish backgrounds who are facing breast cancer. We are supporting women who are at high risk of developing breast cancer and for those who are already diagnosed. And we are connecting women to a community in a way that feels most comfortable. And what we do is we're taking into consideration the stage of diagnosis, whether or not you are undergoing treatment, and also for those women who are concerned about their connections to Judaism. We are providing educational resources, and we are connecting people with peer supporters and with medical experts. And we also have a program for those who are facing ovarian cancer. As women are coping with illness, they are increasingly concerned about insurance coverage, financial planning, estate planning, and general issues of financial and legal wellness. As with all of Shorsharet's programs, we begin with our callers. Every day, we are hearing about our financial concerns, and we are determined to respond to your needs. We hosted a focus group, I was trying to remember how long ago, probably about 6 months ago, to explore the specific areas that are triggering the highest anxieties. And really across the board, the loudest message from the focus groups and also from the calls that we get every single day is that managing the financial aspect of illness feels like a full-time job, and that it begins at the time of diagnosis, and it's one of those issues that continue to linger far beyond treatment. Our panel tonight will discuss how to navigate your insurance company, how you can better understand your disability rights, to offer guidance on financial planning, and we will also hear a personal story from a woman who was proactive in seeking financial assistance. After the presentations, we will have an interactive discussion with the panelists. Our goal this evening is to establish an informative and intimate dialogue between our experts and those of you who are seeking financial health. The goal for tonight is empowerment. Tonight's conversation will be taped, transcribed, and live streamed through our website at www.shorsharet.org. We are taping on the East Coast, and I'm sure that many of you are aware that we are post-storm with Sandy, and we are now, if we look out the windows, there's a nor'easter. So two of our speakers were unable to join us in person, but we are very grateful that they have agreed to join us over the telephone because they also recognize the importance of this topic. So with that, I would actually like to introduce Joanna Morales, who is joining us via telephone. She is a cancer rights attorney, author, speaker, and chief executive officer of Navigating Cancer Survivorship, a national non-for-profit organization connecting people to cancer survivorship resources. She also serves as the principal of North Star Alliances, a business and non-for-profit consulting and service firm. Ms. Morales has spent many years working on behalf of individuals with cancer. She has presented hundreds of educational seminars throughout the country for patients, survivors, caregivers, healthcare professionals, advocates, lawyers, employers, and the general public. In addition, Ms. Morales serves on numerous cancer community committees and boards. She has published in a variety of publications and contributed to a book. Ms. Morales has received numerous awards and recognition for her service to the cancer community and her work in the area of legislative advocacy. We are privileged to have her here with us this evening. So, Ms. Morales, I will go ahead and work the slides for you if you just tell me when to move on to the next slide. So, Ms. Morales, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I'm, again, sorry that I'm not able to be there in person tonight. But my purpose tonight is to talk to you a little bit about health insurance. And a health crisis typically brings with it a need for health care. And having health insurance is an important way to protect your financial health while accessing health care. But if you have a pre-existing medical condition like breast cancer, knowing what your options are to keep or to get health insurance coverage is key. So I'm going to provide you with an overview of some of the ways to find insurance, how to keep it, and how to get insurance if you're uninsured. And I want to start with COBRA. And COBRA is a federal law that allows you to keep employer-sponsored health insurance coverage if you leave your job, maybe reduce your hours, or if you age out of your parents' health insurance plan. Now, this is a great way for you to keep your health insurance coverage that you are getting through an employer, but the downside is that you're responsible for paying the whole premium of what your employer was paying for your health insurance coverage. And I always say that we don't appreciate what our employers pay for our health insurance coverage until we have to write that check ourselves. So there are some programs out there to help pay for COBRA premiums or health insurance premiums or copay assistance. So there are some ways to kind of alleviate the expense of COBRA, but it is a good way to keep your coverage, especially if you're in the middle of treatment, because then you don't want to have to worry about changing providers, and if any of your providers don't take a different type of health insurance coverage, then you're kind of stuck. Now, COBRA only applies to employers with 20 or more employees, so there may be a state version of COBRA for smaller employers in your state. Now, COBRA only lasts between 18 and 36 months, depending on your qualifying event. So, for example, if you lose your job and you're eligible for COBRA, you can keep COBRA coverage for up to 18 months. But then the question becomes, well, what do you do if you have a pre-existing condition like cancer after your COBRA coverage ends? And that's where HIPAA comes in. And HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And most people are familiar with HIPAA because of its privacy protections. But HIPAA was a federal law that was also meant to protect people with pre-existing conditions from discrimination in the health insurance market, but only in certain circumstances. So it's only providing these protections when you're moving between two group plans, like when you're moving between two employers, or when you're moving from a COBRA plan to a HIPAA plan. And I'll explain that a little bit more in just a second. But the most important thing to remember about HIPAA is 63 days. You cannot have a gap in your health insurance coverage longer than 63 days, or you lose some of the protections that HIPAA offers. So if your COBRA is about to end and you're looking at your HIPAA plan options, or if you're going to a new employer, you never want to have a gap between any of your insurance coverage that lasts longer than 63 days. Now, when COBRA ends, you may be eligible for what's called a HIPAA guarantee issue plan. And they call it that because you're guaranteed to have it issued to you. But in order to get a HIPAA plan, you actually have to exhaust your COBRA coverage or if you're eligible for state COBRA coverage. And you can't be eligible for any other group plans or Medicare or Medicaid. And again, you can't have that gap that lasts longer than 63 days. And there's 3 options for a HIPAA plan depending on the state that you live in. So for both New York and New Jersey, every insurance company that writes policies in the individual market in New York and New Jersey also have to offer a HIPAA plan, and you can't be denied. However, you also are not protected in terms of price. So HIPAA plans are allowed to charge you what they decide they want to charge you. So HIPAA plans can also be expensive. And again, I would point people towards the financial assistance resources to pay for health insurance premiums. Now, HIPAA also provides some protections when you're moving between plans. So if you're moving between 2 jobs and you're worried because you have a pre-existing condition about what's going to happen at that new employer, HIPAA can provide some protection. And the way that it does that is through limiting a pre-existing condition exclusion period. And what that is a period of time that a new insurer can say to you, we're going to give you health insurance coverage, but we're not going to cover anything related to your pre-existing condition. So if your pre-existing condition is cancer and you break your arm or have to go to the emergency room because you're in a car accident, they're going to cover that, but they're not going to cover anything related to your cancer treatment, and that's obviously a problem. So HIPAA limited those pre-existing condition exclusion periods to 12 months. But then it also gave you a way to eliminate it further or reduce it or get rid of it entirely. And it did that through something called creditable coverage. And creditable coverage is credit that you get for time that you had health insurance coverage in the past. So if you worked at a previous job and had 6 months of creditable health insurance coverage, you can use that 6 months, subtract it from that 12-month exclusion period that your new insurance plan is imposing, and you'll only face a 6-month exclusion period. So it requires you to do a little bit of math, but you can actually get rid of any exclusion period entirely. But the key to all of this is that you can't have a gap between your insurance coverage that lasts longer than 63 days. So I know that was kind of fast, and I'm going to keep moving through, and obviously if you have questions, we can come back to that at the end of the program. So in terms of ways to get insurance coverage, if you have a pre-existing condition, that can be really difficult because if you try to go buy an individual health insurance plan with a pre-existing condition like cancer, it's pretty impossible. And even if you are offered an insurance plan, chances are it's going to be so expensive that you can't afford it anyway. So there are a few options out there for individuals with pre-existing conditions. And the first one that I want to talk about is the Pre-Existing Condition Insurance Plan, or PSIP. And PSIP was actually created by the Affordable Care Act, or what most people refer to as healthcare reform, in 2010. And PSIP is for individuals who are U.S. citizens or lawful residents who have a pre-existing condition and have been uninsured for the previous 6 months. So this isn't necessarily a way to keep your health insurance coverage if your COBRA is ending or if you're on a HIPAA plan and are looking for the next option. This is really for individuals who've been uninsured for a period of time and are trying to get access to health insurance coverage. So for more information about PSIP, which is available in every state, you can go to pcip.gov, psip.gov. And you can find very clear information about the PSIP plan in your state, what the prices would be, the coverage, all of that detailed information in a very usable format. So there are also state-level high-risk insurance pools or major risk insurance, and they aren't available in every state. So there's only about 35 states that have them, and I mention them because I'm going to assume that not necessarily everyone watching is from New York or New Jersey, both of which do not have major risk or high-risk insurance pools. But if you wanted to find out if your state had a PSIP plan, you could actually go to healthcare.gov. And healthcare.gov is a website that is run by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that has information about what your health insurance options are. So you can go to that website, and on the bottom left-hand corner, it asks you what state you live in. And then you ask about 4 more questions about who you are and the type of health insurance coverage that you're looking for and your medical conditions, if you have any. And it will tell you what your insurance options are specific to you in your state. So it's a really excellent tool to find out what your options are. So maybe even if you have health insurance coverage and are kind of looking to see what your other options are, that's a place where you can go. So to find out information about the high-risk insurance pools in your state or any other type of health insurance coverage, you can go to healthcare.gov. And then the two federal health insurance programs, Medicare and Medicaid, are also options for individuals with pre-existing conditions. Medicare is the federal program for individuals who are 65 or older or have a disability under Social Security standards. And Medicaid is for individuals with a low income and some other type of eligibility requirement, which could be that you're a pregnant woman, or most likely when we're talking about the cancer community, you're qualifying through something called the AIDS, Blind, and Disabled program. So you're accessing Medicaid because you have a low income and you have a disability, in this case, cancer. So those are some of just a brief overview of some of the options. So on the next slide, I want to talk about just some of the things that healthcare reform has brought us that have been particularly useful to individuals with pre-existing conditions such as cancer. So if you could actually go to the next slide.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And the first thing that I want to mention is that there are two ways where the Affordable Care Act specifically helps children and adolescents and young adults. And the first is that children under the age of 19 can't be denied health insurance coverage anymore, regardless of the fact that they have a pre-existing condition. And that's actually pretty significant. I've been doing this for about 18 years, and I never thought that I would see the day. So children under 19 can't be denied health insurance coverage, and they can't be charged more because they have a pre-existing condition. The second thing that it did was that adolescents and young adults can stay on their parents' health insurance plan until the age of 26. And this has been pretty significant. We've seen in the last 2 years about 3 million young adults get access to health insurance coverage specifically because of this provision. And then the Affordable Care Act also eliminated lifetime caps and will eventually eliminate entirely annual caps. And what those are on your insurance policy, an insurance company could previously say, once you hit $1 million in health care, we're not going to cover anything else, and that's it. And we know with the cost of chronic medical conditions such as cancer, be extremely expensive, and so that was a significant benefit to the cancer community to eliminate those lifetime caps. And the same thing with annual caps as well. We were seeing annual caps that were maybe only $75,000 a year or $25,000 a year, and that was really a huge financial burden on individuals with those policies because then they would have to pay for all the rest of their health care out of pocket. And then the Affordable Care Act also eliminated rescissions. And rescissions are what insurance companies would do once you tried to file a claim on your health insurance policy. So if you filed a claim and said that you needed cancer care, they would go back to your original application and try to find a reason to cancel your policy. Maybe you left off something, you got a date wrong on previous health care that you've had, and then they would cancel your policy. And this was happening all the time and most often in the cancer community. And then healthcare reform did tons of other things, but the ones that I want to highlight because they really speak to the financial impact are there's free preventative care now. So there's a list of specific preventative services that you can find on healthcare.gov. And those things include BRCA counseling, mammography for women 40 and older on an annual basis, and then obviously if you're high risk, talking with your doctor about doing that more often if necessary. Specific preventative services that are now free to you if you have health insurance coverage, not paying, so that you're not paying copays, any coinsurance, and it's not being applied to deductibles. So that free preventative care is entirely free to encourage people to actually get preventative care. And then medical loss ratio is a technical term that means that when insurance companies collect your premiums, what you pay on a monthly basis, they have to pay now. They have to use that money for your care, and they have to use 80 to 85% of your premiums on your care, so that their administrative costs or their marketing or the other things that they do on an administrative level can't be more than 15 to 20% of the premium that you're paying. And the reason this is significant is not only does it require insurance companies to keep administrative costs down and to give you quality care, they don't. They actually have to give you a rebate. And we've seen such significant rebates across the country. 2011 was the first year that this went into effect. 2012. And we were seeing millions and millions of dollars in each state going back to consumers. So this was actually something that significantly affected people's pocketbooks. And then there are a number of changes that are coming in 2014. And there are lots of new health insurance options, changes to our systems. Some states will actually expand Medicaid to all low-income adults, and you don't need to meet a secondary eligibility requirement. But the most significant one that I want to mention is adults will no longer have to worry about being discriminated against because of their pre-existing conditions. So I mentioned that applied to children already, but for adults, we have to wait until 2014 for that to go into effect. So you can no longer be denied coverage because of a pre-existing condition, and you can't be charged more. And in addition to not being able to charge you more for having a pre-existing condition, they're also doing away with what's called gender rating, where women are actually charged more for their health insurance coverage, which is the way it is now. So that's just a very quick overview of some ways that health insurance has an impact on your financial health because of a health crisis, and I'm happy to take questions later.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. That was a wonderful crash course in healthcare reforms and accessing insurance. The way that you put it so easily, it really clarifies for us that the healthcare reform that is hundreds and hundreds of pages. So that was actually very helpful to get an overview. So thank you for that, and we will certainly have questions for you after everyone has presented. Our next speaker is Gabe Herman. He is a lawyer who practices in New York and New Jersey. He specializes in disability law and has lectured to both legal groups and disability-related organizations. Mr. Herman has appeared on CNN-FN addressing issues about disability claims, and we are very grateful to have him share his expertise with us this evening. So, Mr. Herman, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. The Social Security Disability Program is designed to provide financial assistance to those who are eligible for benefits. There are two types of benefits available: the Supplemental Security Income Program. How do we do this? Supplemental Security Income Program and the Social Security Disability Program. Supplemental Security Income, commonly called SSI, is a program that generally runs parallel with state welfare programs. Typically, an SSI beneficiary must have less than $2,000 in savings or resources, plus an additional $1,500 can be put aside in an account earmarked for burial funds. The household income limits for an SSI program is based on something called the federal benefit rate, the FBR. This FBR represents both the SSI income limit and the maximum federal monthly SSI payments. In 2012, the FBR was $698 per month for an individual and $1,048 per month for couples. For Social Security disability, household income and assets are not considered. The test is whether a claimant is insured. That is, whether he or she has earned enough in each of the 5 preceding 10 years to be eligible for 4 quarters of coverage. As of 2013, a quarter of coverage is earnings of $1,160 per quarter. So you have 4. It's funny. It's years ago you had to earn that quarter of coverage in the quarter of time. So January to March, April to June, July to September, and October to December. And if you earned all of it the first month of the year, you were out of luck for the rest of the year. About 5-6 years, no, 15, 16 years ago, they changed that to quarters of coverage. You can earn all of your earnings in the first month of the year, and you're deemed having earned the money till till the end of the year. Although they won't credit it to you for purposes of eligibility for disability, if applicable, until you've satisfied the second quarter, third quarter, or fourth quarter, so the end of every month of that quarter. But a safe rule of thumb for earnings is that if you have earned $1,160, which is the 2013 number, or if you have earned at least $5,000 in at least 5 of the previous 10 years, then you're probably eligible for Social Security disability benefits. Unfortunately, there is commentary to almost everything that I say. I'm trying to be as general as I can. Obviously, I'm available to answer questions at the end. The biggest shortcoming of the Social Security programs is that a non-working spouse who becomes disabled but did not have the opportunity to accrue sufficient quarters of coverage is usually not going to qualify for Social Security disability benefits. That is, if, for example, a wife doesn't work, a husband supports the household, hasn't worked in 5 of the previous 10 years, probably won't be eligible for Social Security disability benefits, and that same spouse whose husband is earning over the federal benefit amount, there's no SSI eligibility either. This is unfortunate. The Social Security never really contemplated benefits for non-working spouses under the Social Security disability program. They focused more on retirement, widows, retirees, people over age 50 or 60. Unfortunately, once one files a claim, things rarely move quickly through the agency's bureaucracy. The timeframes noted on the chart listed here are typical numbers, which is initial application until initial decision is usually 6 months. If you're in New York, then the next step is a hearing request, so that's typically 12 to 18 months before you can get to a hearing. New Jersey, Connecticut, and many of the other states, I'm sorry, since I work primarily in the tri-state area, I don't really focus on the other states, but most states do have this reconsideration step, which means after your initial application and if there's an initial denial, the next step is reconsideration, which is 3 to 6 months. Usually the decision makers rubber stamp the initial decision. If they don't, when they rubber stamp, the next step is a request for hearing, which is 12 to 18 months. Fortunately, as noted, New York has eliminated that step 1 of the process, but even so, the waiting times for a typical disability claim are lengthy. Having said that, there are exceptions, and here's some good news. Well, for the wait, unfortunately not for the people that are suffering the conditions. The primary exception is something called a compassionate allowance. These cases are flagged as critical cases by the Social Security Administration, and they are absolutely expedited. I've had clients that I file, cancer clients, actually several different types of cancers that I file, and I'm not joking when I say within 2 weeks my clients are contacting me, or the agency's contacting me to tell me that the claim was approved. There are 165 listed disorders and conditions which qualify for this extremely expedited program. One example is item number 19, breast cancer, with distant metastasis or where it is inoperable or unresectable. Besides the compassionate allowances, Social Security also has a list of disorders and conditions which, if properly established, increase the likelihood of a faster resolution. While it won't be a matter of weeks or even days, as it is with the compassionate allowance, a properly developed medical file which shows conditions which satisfy the listings has, in my experience, resulted in a relatively rapid favorable determination. For specific information on the various cancer-related listings, you can Google SSA listing 13.00. If you want to just look at the different kinds of medical conditions that fall under these qualifications, SSA listings, Google, trust me, just doing that, you're going to find yourself at at Social Security's guidelines and the site. Medical benefits. While ideally a person who is approved disability would immediately be eligible for medical coverage, that is only the case for successful SSI claims, the supplemental security income claims. In those cases, a successful claimant will immediately be eligible for Medicaid, which Ms. Morales spoke about briefly. The good news is that the Medicaid program to which the claimant would be eligible is one that's a federal administered program. State programs have their requirements, pregnancy or the age, the disability, the need. You can get qualified for state Medicaid as a, quote, disabled person by with your doctor's assistance. The thing that needs to be clear is that the the state and the Medicaid program is going to be constantly reviewing and constantly reevaluating you. And frankly, they don't give you peace in a time when you most need it, which is during the time that you're battling the condition. So the good news with the federal program is if you qualify for SSI, then as long as you're eligible for SSI, you are also eligible for the Medicaid program. Again, it is only for the SSI claimants. This is Medicaid. In virtually all cases, Social Security disability beneficiaries must wait 24 months after the date of eligibility to become eligible for benefits from Medicare. The date of eligibility is actually very different from the date of disability. It's 6 months later, actually technically 5 full months later, or 12 months prior to the date an application is filed, whichever is the more recent date. A common misperception is that Medicare starts 2 years after a disability win. That's incorrect. The count begins from the date of eligibility, and so in some cases where a claim takes over 18 months, which as you saw earlier, it unfortunately does happen, 18 months from the application date, a claimant might be eligible for retroactive Medicare. I rarely recommend that my clients that win in that circumstance pay in the additional prior premium for the Medicare, primarily because you pay in the Medicare, so you pay out your $100, $200, $500,000, $2,000 in retroactive premiums. And yes, the Medicare will pay for the treatment and in theory may reimburse a claimant for out-of-pocket medical expenses. The problem is that doctors have a different rate for Medicare patients versus regular patients. So trying to get reimbursed the $10,000, $20,000 that's Medicare eligible for reimbursement honestly might be more trouble than it's worth. And in truth, there are so many of these programs that make out-of-pocket expenses almost de minimis. I usually recommend that my clients don't do it. But it is an option if somebody is willing or has the means and the records, which is the key, the records to do this, it is an option to get reimbursed for retroactive Medicare benefits. Ms. Morales did mention this, but I want to mention it or reiterate it as well, that every state does have the affordable health insurance for individuals with pre-existing conditions. I have looked at it. I have made recommendations to my clients. In New York, there are a couple of programs. The range in insurance cost, depending on the age of the individual asking for it or seeking it, is $300 to $600. Numbers might have changed recently. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I have had clients that have been very pleased with it when they have had no other options for health insurance, and call it the rack rates, the market rates were just prohibitive or unavailable because of the pre-existing condition. Continuing disability and continuing disability review. Ideally, once you've finally been approved for disability benefits, the agency will leave you alone. Unfortunately, the regulations governing Social Security do authorize the administration to review your claim. Typically when that happens, it's between 3 and 5 years after an initial award, although lately I have seen it happening more frequently. Social Security will send you a notice that you are being reviewed and will ask for updated treatment information. And that is why it is so critical that you maintain an ongoing paper trail of medical treatment, documenting your conditions, side effects, and why you are unable to work. Try to make sure that you have a treating physician with whom you have a personal relationship who who you can ask and who will be willing to prepare a narrative summary of your medical condition and how it negatively impacts your ability to work. Ideally, if you continue to be unable to work, Social Security will continue your benefits. If they cease your benefits, you have the right to appeal, and if you prove your ongoing disability, the benefits will continue. The good news is that the standard for Social Security to prove medical improvement and thus justify taking away benefits is much more stringent and allows far less leeway than the standards for determining an initial claim. Put another way, when somebody comes to me and says Social Security is reviewing my case, assuming that they've done everything that I have recommended previously and they have their records and they're receiving their treatment, more often than not, the agency will continue the benefits. And I can't do this without occasional war stories. I hung up the phone yesterday with one of my clients who had absolutely zero follow-up post lung cancer. He didn't go to the doctor at all, and because or at least he didn't go to the oncologist and to the specialist, but he did go enough to his treating doctor that it was just sufficient enough for the agency to reestablish his benefits or to continue his benefits. Overpayment. With the advances in medical science, as Shira mentioned earlier, and the ever-improving treatment options, it's possible that a successful claimant who was, quote, on disability will get to the date where he or she can return to work. I cannot emphasize this enough. Be clear on the rules for earnings. While on disability, you may work and earn up to just about $600 per month without triggering scrutiny. This is the number that I use to recommend to my clients. The reason for the 600 is because the real number is 720 to 750. 720 in 2012, and it's going up to 750 in 2013. If you earn over that amount in any 1 month, you are triggering the start of a trial work period. You get a cumulative 9 months, and that's not 9 consecutive months, it's 9 months. So a month here, 3 months there, 4 months somewhere else, you've hit 8 months, and you're almost at the point where you've exhausted your trial work period. Once you have exhausted any earnings under at the trial work months, the next step is substantial gainful activity. At that point, Social Security will look at your earnings, and in 2012, the number is $1,010. In 2013, it's going to be $1,040. But any month when you exceed earnings of that amount, going forward, is going to be a month that you are ineligible for your Social Security disability benefits. What that means is if you've earned your $800 a month and blown through the 9-month trial work period, great. If you stay at $800 a month and never go over $1,000, you're going to be fine going forward. There's not going to be a problem. If, on the other hand, you exhaust your 9 months and the following month you make $1,100 or $1,200, unless there are exceptional circumstances, you're going to be counted against for the you're eventually going to have an overpayment. If you are overpaid, Social Security rarely catches the error for years, and when they finally do, the overpayment is often in the tens of thousands of dollars. If you get one of those notices, though, you shouldn't panic. The good news is that it is possible to negotiate a payment plan to repay the overpayment. Alternatively, and preferably, an argument can be made that the overpayment did not happen. Never assume that Social Security's information and calculations are correct. Challenge them and confirm their numbers. I have been successful on these kinds of essentially it's an argument innumerable times, and have been able to get people to continue to receive their disability benefits even as they have been earning what is deemed more than substantial gainful activity. Finally, while it is possible to make an argument for waiver of the overpayment, the rules governing the overpayment waiver make it a very hard sell. It's not something that it's doable. It's very, very case specific. I hope that this brief overview was helpful. Please don't be disheartened by anything that I've said. If you are in need of disability benefits, file for them or find someone to help you file a claim. You have nothing to lose and enough to gain by sticking with the process to always make it worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. I think some of the takeaways from that is that it's important to stay organized, to make sure that you document clearly. And really, I think the most important takeaway is that you need to advocate for yourself and to continue to do that and to fight for your rights with that. So thank you. Our next speaker is Miss Rena Cole. She is the first Vice President of Investments and Wealth Advisor at UBS Financial Services since 2009. And before that, she was the first Vice President with Morgan Stanley for 16 years. Ms. Cole is licensed for life, accident, and health insurance, long-term care insurance, and annuities. Ms. Cole began this conversation with us about a year and a half ago, and I'm glad that she has really been a significant part of this dialogue throughout the planning for this event. So, Ms. Cole, the floor is yours.
That's not me.
Oops, okay. Let's get to your slides. Oh, okay.
That's me.
That's you. Okay.
Thank you. I'll try and get through this without coughing up a lung again. The point, I only have one slide, and I think the point of what we want to, or what I want to talk about today, is to try and make this as easy and simple as possible in dealing with your current financial situation, because you need to focus your attentions and your strength on much more important things than your brokerage accounts and your savings accounts and all of that. So I have a couple of logistical things to talk about, and then some practical investment ideas that we'll talk about at the end, and we'll just go through these bullet points. The first is to try and consolidate what you have. Most of our clients, and I'm sure most of you, have IRAs in one place, old 401ks somewhere else, savings accounts, checking accounts, brokerages accounts. You're getting statements from 5, 6, 7 different financial institutions in many cases. The best thing to do is try and consolidate as much as possible. Some people don't feel comfortable working with one financial institution. That's fine. Try and get it down to 2, maximum 3. But you need to be able to get your hands on everything that you have and to know everything that you have. We have clients all the time, 2 years into a relationship with working with somebody, they come up with a statement of an account that they didn't even know existed any longer, from an old job that they had that they stopped getting a statement for, and all of a sudden they were tracked down again. So you don't want to be dealing with any of this. You want to make sure that everything is consolidated and in one place, and you can keep track of everything. Nowadays, a lot of people like getting their statements online instead of getting hard copies. Great, do that. But the next part of this is be organized. We use this, and I'm going to give this to you guys afterwards. They can post it online. We use this for our clients. It's just a personal informational document. And it's 4 or 5 pages, and it gives you highlights, and it sort of jogs your memory as to all different accounts that you have, and it puts in one place, in this one little packet or folder, everything that you have with all of the passwords and the ID numbers. And you can't have all this information yourself. Your spouse, your children, somebody else that you're with has to be able to have access to all of this information. If God forbid something happens to you, somebody else needs to be able to have access to these assets. So being organized is of primary importance, at this time in everybody's lives. You need to know what you have. You need to know where it is. You need to be able to put into this document or on your own list who your contact person is. Your spouse may know that you have an old 401k somewhere, but they have no idea how to get in contact with those people. At least a phone number, let alone, the name of the benefits person or the HR person. You need to put down your passwords. Don't forget about safe deposit boxes. People forget about this all the time. You cannot be the only signatory on that box. You have to make sure that somebody else is a signatory, whether it's your spouse, your sister, your parents, your children, who are of age, obviously. But somebody else should have access to all of these things, because if something happens and you can't get to that box, somebody else needs to be able to access all of your important papers. So again, being organized is very important. Another thing that we try and go through with our clients relatively regularly is verifying who the listed beneficiaries are on all of their accounts. Now, in brokerage accounts, you do not list beneficiaries for non-IRA accounts. Those are part of your estate, and however your wills designate how your assets should be divided, that's how your regular brokerage accounts, that's what they're part of. Your IRAs, however, do have listed beneficiaries. You need to make sure that somebody is listed. It should never be your estate, because that throws those assets into your estate, it puts it into probate, and then it's locked up until the estate is settled. You want to name somebody, a charity, it doesn't matter, and you can name 15 people as the beneficiaries, but you want to make sure that somebody is listed, otherwise those assets get frozen until the estates are settled. So you want to make sure that all of this beneficiary information is updated. You could change it as often as you want. And we have clients who do that every time they get into an argument with their children. They do change it, and that's fine. They will just use the most recent one that's on file, but you just want to make sure that there is a beneficiary listed for all of your assets. You also want to make sure that you coordinate all of this with your attorney, your accountant, and your financial advisor. We try and have relationships with our clients' estate attorneys and their accountants as well. It's important that everybody is on the same page. It's also important that whoever you're working with in a financial capacity, let alone your physicians, but in a financial capacity, that you have a relationship with them, that you can talk to them about what's going on in your lives. Because as a financial advisor, we need to know what's going on. We need to know if you're facing a health crisis, if you have somebody in your family that is facing a health crisis that we're going to need to help support them. So hopefully you have that kind of a relationship with whoever you're working with. And if you don't, then you might be working with the wrong person. Because honestly, that's the kind of relationship that everybody should have with their advisors. But once you do have that relationship, it's important to hook everybody in together. And we'll have conference calls or in-face meetings with the attorneys and the accountants at the same time, because we want to make sure we're all on the same page and giving the client the right guidance, to suit whatever they need, because everybody is different. So that I really can't stress that enough. That's a really important point in getting all of your assets together and taking care of all of your financial needs. But it's important that you have that relationship with whoever you're dealing with. I'm not going to say I'm the first call, for some of our clients, but I'd like to think that I'm in the top 5 when something good and when something bad happens. We're getting calls now for clients, with this hurricane that, they need money. They need to rebuild a roof. They need to buy a car. They know they're not going to get reimbursed from insurance anytime soon, and you need to be able to talk to the people that you work with. Very rarely nowadays, but every once in a while, we will find clients who are still holding paper stock certificates and physical bonds. This is not a good idea. They're very cute to hang on the wall. The Disney certificate is adorable. It has all the characters. But it's so difficult. If something happens to the person that owns that certificate, it is very difficult to get everything in order. The easiest thing to do is to deposit those certificates with a financial institution. It doesn't cost anything. It shouldn't cost you anything. They will send you statements every month. They'll reinvest the dividends if that's how you've had it all along. They'll pay out the dividends if that's what you want. But owning those physical stock certificates or the physical bonds, it gives everybody else a headache when you're not around to deal with it. So again, I would urge you to make sure that you deposit those physical certificates somewhere and take care of that. Another area, before we get to the specifics of how you might want to be investing, is you might want to be looking to maximize credit at this time. I'm not saying to max out your credit cards, but because liquidity is an issue and you may need access to cash, you might be looking to refinance your house. With the interest rates where they are right now, that could free up an extra couple $1,000s a month for you by getting a lower rate. Consolidating credit cards. Depending on what your situation is, you may qualify to take a loan or a distribution from your 401k. Again, there are parameters that you would have to fall within in order to be able to do that. But, it is a time to be looking to maximize those credit relationships in order to get a little bit more liquidity and increase your cash. So that brings us to more of the specifics of how to invest. And I'm not going to give, specific stock recommendations, obviously. I think the key is liquidity is paramount. Everybody is facing a point in their lives where you don't know what's going to be. You don't know what's going to be 3 months from now, 6 months, 6 years from now. There is no way you can be investing your funds under that umbrella. It's impossible. You don't know whether you're going to need to access these funds, and you don't know how much your insurance is going to cover. The liquidity needs for everybody are different. If you have a fantastic insurance policy, you may never need to touch savings. If you thought you had a fantastic insurance policy and it turns out you don't, you may need $50,000 next month. So being liquid is important. It's of utmost importance. Making sure that you are not stuck in volatile investments is, again, extremely important. I'm not saying that you go out tomorrow and you call your financial advisor and you sell everything that you have. I'm not saying that at all. However, you do need to have a conversation, because the worst thing that could happen is a day like today, the market was down 300 points. And you call your advisor and you say, I need to sell $150,000 worth of stock. I need this experimental treatment, whatever it is. You never want to have to sell anything immediately, because you don't know what the market is going to be doing or where that investment is and how it's been performing. The worst thing that you could possibly do is be forced to sell something. The best thing to do is to make sure that you have that liquidity and access to your funds without having to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean putting everything into cash, earning you nothing right now. It does mean that you need to make sure that you have a steady stream of income, that you are in low volatility investments, and that you don't have to be forced to lose sleep at night because you don't have money in the bank, to take a cab to the doctor the next day. So the liquidity is paramount, and the low volatility is extremely important. That's really all I wanted to touch upon. I don't really want to get into long, drawn-out specifics of types of investments. I'm happy to talk about this later. I will just share, I had a very long-term client who got a bad diagnosis and spent a lot of time planning for what she thought was going to be, just the next couple of months. And thank God, the end never came for her, and she's healthy and she's doing great. But that time that she spent planning and making all these changes and getting all of her papers together and planning for what she thought was going to be a bad ending for her, it makes her life now so much easier. So she appreciates what she had to go through in making all of these plans, because now she doesn't have to worry about these things. I read a story, somebody was quoting a gentleman who went through this, and he said he was viewing this as his love letter to his family, making all of these plans and doing the wills and the trust and all of that, making it easy for everybody when he wasn't going to be around to deal with all of this. So hopefully nobody will have to look at it like that, but it's just, nobody wants to be thinking about these things, and that's why I say make it as easy as possible so you deal with this for a couple of weeks, and then you don't have to be thinking about these things, and you can worry about all the other important things that everybody's facing.
Great, thank you, Ms. Cole. I want to highlight something that you just said, because we do receive a lot of phone calls from women who are overwhelmed by this, and they don't want to approach it, and they don't want to have these conversations with their family and with their spouses. And so I think that your point in terms of dealing with it and managing it so that you can get it off your plate and it's one less thing to worry about is very important. So thank you for that. Our next speaker is Ms. Jody Sherrill, and she is also joining us over phone this evening. And she advises clients on estate and trust planning, estate administration, special needs planning, and elder and Medicaid planning. She has a solo boutique practice in Tenafly, New Jersey since 2007. Ms. Sherrill is a frequent lecturer to parent groups of special needs children and has taught continuing legal education seminars in various areas of her practice. And Ms. Sherrill was also part of this discussion a year and a half ago, and so we are very happy that she was able to join us and agree to participate in this event, even though she is over the phone. So we are very grateful to you, Ms. Sherrill, for that. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to you, and if you could just tell me as you want me to move along with the slides.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And I do apologize that I'm on the telephone. It just became a little impossible with the weather to get there. So you'll forgive this. It's not nearly the personal touch that I prefer, but nonetheless, it is what it is. So here, I want to piggyback actually on what was just said, because it really really is, for the first question I've asked, what is the first step in the estate planning process? And that is exactly what we've just been discussing. The first step in the estate planning process is to be thoughtful about what needs to happen next. What makes this process easier, what makes this process more organized, is simply addressing the fact that you need to have a process, and that the hardest part about beginning this process is simply beginning it. But once you do that, everyone will probably be able to attest to the fact that once they do that, they are that's the worst part, is just addressing the fact that you need to become a little bit more focused, because the moment you do that, you can breathe. It's like a release, and that's one less thing on your plate that you thought maybe you didn't have control over, but in fact, it's not such a bad process. It's an easy process. You just have to hand it over. So once you do that, I guess we're at number 2, what documents are necessary, the building blocks. I like to call the last will and testament, a power of attorney, and a healthcare document my building blocks, because those documents are the 3 most important documents for anybody. What they say is one thing, but we know we need them. How complex they become is irrelevant, but we know we need them. So the first step is to just make sure that assets, no assets, children, no children, spouse, no spouse, sick, healthy. Every single person needs the building blocks. So number 3, what is the last will and testament? How does a will become effective? So the last will and testament is the number 1 of the building blocks. It is a testamentary document, meaning one that explains our wishes once we have passed away, and it states our wishes and puts somebody in charge of administering those wishes. And the will becomes effective by stating what you want in a written document, and then having that document properly executed in accordance with a particular state. Every state in the United States requires at least 2 witnesses to a last will and testament, and a notary public, that the testator, who is the person making a will, has capacity to make that will. And capacity is a relatively broad topic, one that generally speaking means that they understand that they are making a will, and they understand that they are putting their assets in somebody else's hands, meaning they are understanding who the objects of their bounty are. That's the technical legal term. Who are the people getting their assets? Who are the people who are in charge of this document when somebody dies? And so as long as you understand that, and those are basics, then your will can become effective. And this will can be as simple or as complex depending upon your circumstance. So, for example, if I do not have many assets and do not have children, or have children who are not minors, who are under 18, or even under 21, really, for most states. The reasons for that are not so relevant. But when you have young children, the circumstances become more complex. But when you have adult children and perhaps no spouse, your wills can be very basic and very easy. And those might change as you become more wealthy, as you are married, or as your children are minors, because we might need to have more beneficiaries under a will, meaning the people who inherit things. We might need to protect those assets for the sake of a child, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, and those would be using trust. We might have assets that are something we have to protect as far as the tax structure goes. So at the end of the day, a will can be complex or basic depending upon the value of that estate and the people who might inherit that estate. So a moment ago, we talked about how does the will become effective. We talked about witnesses and a notary. But now, slide 5, can I handwrite a will? Because we not only have people that want to document their wishes in writing, handwriting, but also I found that clients often take a will that exists already, and they scribble little notes or changes. Maybe it's because that's what they want to happen ultimately, or maybe it's because that's what they expect to tell the lawyer when they get around to it, how they want to change the will that exists. In any event, that handwriting, which is known legally as a holographic, that's HOLOGRAPHIC, holographic writing, that means that the question is, how effective and legal are those writings if somebody passes away without finishing the job, without saying to the lawyer, make the changes and then I'm going to sign them, or doesn't even think to tell a lawyer, doesn't even intend, just thinks they're doing the change on their own. So what does a handwriting do in this circumstance? Well, if the handwriting exists and is found either on the original document or with the original document, then that handwriting may be effective if it's signed by the testator, again, the person who makes the will, and it is dated. So if we find a handwriting signed and dated, we may very well have an additional document that we need to deal with when we go to either probate a will and handle the administration of someone's estate. Having said that, really the last thing we ever want is a holographic or handwriting. We always want to think that when we've spoken to you and we've come before you at any point in the estate planning process, that you are very careful not to allow these kinds of things to become your plan. Because, again, back to organization and execution of the plan, a handwriting will create a lot of aggravation. Do we have a handwriting? Is it legal? Is it able to be probated the same way? All the answers to these questions are nothing is the same. The probate is not the same. The process for time is not the same. It will be much more lengthy process. And finally, the cost to probate a handwriting can be exorbitant comparatively. So when we talk about making a will and writing down someone's wishes, we want to make very, very sure that we do so in a way that involves a visit to your attorney and involves formal execution of the document that expresses all of your wishes. And that can change over time. You can do an amendment to a will called a codicil. There are a lot of ways to do things without even rewriting the entire will, but at the end of the day, a handwriting is a last resort. And it's not the most reliable. And again, the cost is really not a very practical option. So you want to just be really careful when you're considering these kind of changes or comments on your will that you do so formally. I think that I touched on number 6 with the options to change my will. When my clients are creating documents, one of the things I try to express to them very clearly is that I'm not asking you to make a decision about every single thing this second that's going to last forever, and you have to think of every contingency, and you need to be concerned about the what if. Now, granted, my job is to concern you with the what if. That's my job, to make sure we've covered all of our bases. But at the same time, it's impractical to think that you will be able to plan for all the what ifs, and that it's best to get something in the document rather than nothing, because you're unable to make a decision at the moment. So, for example, a very good example of this that I find my clients have the most difficulty with is I have children, and I need to place in a will who is their guardian should something happen to me. And that that involves very stressful thinking, and, it's a tough decision to come to. And oftentimes my clients say to themselves, who will be the same parent as I am? And, of course, the answer is nobody. So what the attorney's job is to move you through making a decision about that so that you can, in fact, execute the documents that are so critical to order, and at the same time understanding that these don't have to all be permanent decisions, that God willing we have time, that 6 months down the road I very much may change my mind. And changing your mind is perfectly fine. All you have to do is do a simple codicil that's a paragraph long. The only thing these codicils must make sure that they do, and again, a codicil is a change or an amendment to a will, is follow the exact same testamentary formalities, and that again is witnesses and notary publics and signatures. If the codicil follows those exact formalities, then it will become an additional document that becomes part of the will. And you may change that as many times as you want throughout your lifetime. And people that are healthy, people that are not healthy, they change their documents all the time. These documents are able to be changed with ease. So that's a very important thing to understand, that once you make these decisions, and sometimes it's a matter of just close your eyes and make the best decision you can at that moment so that a decision has been made. Because the alternative is complete disorder, and that's not a good alternative for most people. So what are, the next slide, how do I protect my children? Well, this gets back to when we do a last will and testament, one of the most important things is making sure that the document is effective. And once we do that, the question is, how do I make sure that my children are protected? A lot of that will depend upon their age, but the discussion will really be the same. Regardless of age, it will be critical to determine whether or not they are responsible enough to inherit money outright. That's really the question. What happens when they get money in their pocket that is theirs to keep and do with as they please? Are they responsible? Do they have stable marriages? There are no sure things, but sometimes you know that when you make a document, and you might say, I can't guarantee that. I do not want my assets to go to my child and ultimately be part of a discussion in a marital dispute. Are my children involved in activities that are not so savory? Do I have to be concerned about that? Are my children fantastic, perfect beings, but they do tend to spend a little money irresponsibly? All of these questions are important ones to have, and they may require that a trust be established for their benefit, one that protects against creditors, one that protects against spouses, one that protects them against themselves, and one that just protects them because they're just too young to inherit money in the first place. So these discussions are very critical to have, but not so difficult to resolve once the discussion is had. And that kind of leads into slide 8 about trust. When we talk about that, we are talking about, should the trust just be till they're 30, till they're old enough to make their own decisions? Do I have such significant assets that a lifetime trust is appropriate? Do my children have special needs I need to be aware of, and therefore I need to protect them as well? So all of these questions need to take place, and the answers reveal themselves to your attorney as to what is appropriate as far as your plan, and certainly what is appropriate with respect to asking the question.
Ms. Cheryl, we have about 2 minutes left.
So sorry, I'm going to go to healthcare documents and powers of attorney then.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I felt that I lost track of time a little bit.
No, it was very helpful.
It's hard when you're virtual to figure out what's going on.
All right.
So the powers of attorney and healthcare documents really are the most important things. Frankly, I think that in a sense, if I realized that I would be limited in time, I should have began with them, because they are the living documents, the documents that operate when somebody becomes unable to make their own decisions, either for legal or financial reasons or health-related decisions. And These documents are the most critical. If you never make a will, if you never do much with an attorney, my suggestion is that these documents are very, very useful. And, of course, the most inexpensive because they are almost all forms. So I urge you all to make sure you've got those documents. Healthcare documents, the word living will, I remember that being a question, is a term for almost something in the event of neurological death, a very terminal condition that is unable to change. Those are all important documents. But the health care proxy, which is in addition to a living will, is something that absolutely is a necessity because that appoints a health care representative to coordinate with physicians, hospitals, bank records of your health, and make decisions in case you can't, to decline treatment, to accept treatment, to choose between treatment and procedures. So this is the most critical document. It's not the form that you sign at a hospital. It shouldn't be. That form is way too basic. This form should consider HIPAA, which is the Federal Health Care Act that relates to privacy. And again, finally, your powers of attorney. Who is going to take care of your basic financial concerns as far as paying bills, making financial investments, if necessary, changing ownership of things, etc. This power of attorney is a critical document that appoints, both of these documents appoint a representative for you as an agent to serve in your place. And I guess if I had no more time, I would have to conclude with that, although there's so much more. I apologize that I didn't get to all my material.
Well, thank you. And I think that, again, the theme of the evening is that all of the topics that we're discussing tonight seem overwhelming, and we hear that a lot from the women. And I guess the message is start the process. Because once you start the process, then I think you can go ahead and establish these building blocks that Ms. Cheryl was discussing. We're going to conclude our panel discussion tonight with Michelle Shaganov. Michelle represents the many women of Sharsheret who are concerned about the financial well-being once diagnosed. This is something that Michelle and I discussed when she was diagnosed, and what was most impressive to me was her doing just that, her starting the process and her being proactive in securing her financial health. So, Ms. Shaganov, I'm going to ask you to share briefly some of your experiences and some of your takeaways.
Good evening, everyone. I hope by sharing my story, I'll make the financial assistance application process a little less daunting. As Shira said, I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm now almost 2 years out from treatment. Thank you very much. So pre-cancer, unfortunately, I'm not independently wealthy. We all wish, we were. I was working part-time, 3 to 4 days a week. It kind of rotated, dealing with just day-to-day expenses, student loans, mortgage. I had a young baby, so we were also dealing with childcare, and just trying to make ends meet. And basically doing okay. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 27. My son was 16 months old when I was diagnosed. And that's when things really changed. The just making ends meet really took a turn for the worse. My treatment involved 2 surgeries, 4 months of chemo, 5 weeks of radiation. Anyone who's had a health crisis knows it's exhausting. I was sick, tired. That affected my ability to work. I was only working a few days a week. And the loss of income we wound up with financial difficulties. And that was a big problem because we had to pay those hospital bills somehow. So I'm going to get into how exactly we dealt with the mounting hospital debt. So my first step was reaching out to family and friends for whatever help we could get from family and friends. For instance, rides to treatment. A friend gave us a Fresh Direct gift card. We had help from friends of friends with watching my son while I was in treatment, or just not feeling up to watching him. I would also say utilize whatever available resources you have. I had a friend who happened to be a social worker. I talked with her about my situation, and she referred me to one nonprofit organization, and she also contacted Sloan Kettering social worker, where I was treated, to ask about financial assistance programs that were available there. I spoke to the social worker at the hospital where I was treated, at Sloan, and I was referred to 2 financial assistance programs that they have. One was a medical financial assistance program, which helped with the hospital bills, and the other was a non-medical financial assistance program for things like parking, childcare, so on and so forth. That was very helpful, but that wasn't enough, unfortunately. And so I was referred to the 2 major non-for-profits that deal with cancer patients that everyone's probably very familiar with, American Cancer Society and Cancer Care. Unfortunately, I did not meet their eligibility requirements for Cancer Care copayment assistance program. I just earned too much money. And American Cancer Society, similar issue. Also, they do not have Road to Recovery in New York City. That's a program where cancer patients have rides to treatment. They also do not reimburse for gas mileage if you live what they deem close enough to the hospital. So that's what I call my I'll just try my luck point. I got desperate. You have to pay the bills. The hospital bills are coming in, and I figured I will just try my luck and go online, search Google, just put in random search terms, cancer, financial assistance, breast cancer, financial assistance, and see what comes up. And that actually did work out quite well for us through small non-for-profit organizations that you don't hear so much about. We were actually able to break even and pay off all the medical bills. So some of, I guess, the general tips that I learned along the way is your community is your first step and your best resource for help and information. Start with family, friends, your religious community, organizations. First of all, they can all pitch in with money, food, childcare, chores, and just ideas of where to go next. When applying, pay really close attention to the eligibility requirements. They're different for every organization. I would say maximize efficiency. A lot of the applications ask for the same things over and over and over again. Just get everything in one shot as much as possible. Time is of the essence when you're in a health crisis. Energy is in short supply. There are things that you can really get in one shot, like doctor's notes, almost every single financial assistance application asks for those, or if it's a breast cancer financial assistance, biopsy scan, just have a bunch of copies of those. Don't rely on your memory. This was something that this was a mistake that I made at work when I was going through treatment. I am an estate attorney. I'm in good company with the attorneys here, and I thought, oh, I have a photographic memory. I can just remember everything. And I found that wasn't working so well for me. I just didn't have the concentration and focus that I had pre-treatment, and I had to start keeping detailed lists to stay organized. So keep lists. Applications often have deadlines, and you want to stay on top of those. It's been said by a few of the prior presenters, stay organized. Really stay organized. Keep everything in one place. That will make things much easier. I would also say have an open mind and apply to multiple organizations at one time. Kind of treat it as a college application process. I know that sounds funny, but you really don't lose anything by applying to an organization. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're not going to hear back, or there's going to be a long waiting period. You really lose nothing by applying, even if something's in a different state, or it's an organization that you haven't heard of before. And also something to keep in mind is one organization is probably not going to be able to meet your entire financial need. A lot of the organizations that we received help from were really small non-for-profits that were donation-funded, volunteer-run, just had a very small budget of what they were able to provide us with. So it took kind of piecing together several organizations and several types of assistance to be able to get through that time. And I would also say be creative and think outside the box. Every little bit helps, and there are different kinds of assistance. There's not just financial assistance and grants. There's co-payment assistance, prescription assistance. Some organizations provide meals. Some organizations provide assistance with childcare or household chores, or just brightening up a difficult time. There are quite a few organizations that have pampering services or free vacations, which is you don't have the extra income for when you're going through a health crisis, but you need a mental health break as well. I would also suggest tag teaming if the person going through a health crisis is not so great at handling forms or is not so nuts about numbers. One person does the forms, maybe a friend, a spouse, somebody else handles a different part. That was our situation. I hate numbers, I hate math. I told my husband, I will find the applications, I will find the organizations that I can apply for. Please handle the finance part. Give me all the numbers, I'll put them in. Don't make me look at them. That's it. And that's all I have, Shira, unless there are questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, that really, you were really serving as a peer supporter to hundreds of women who are going to listen to your tips tonight. So thank you for sharing your experience and your takeaways. I just want to say that there are many organizations in the Jewish community that do offer financial aid. So that's something that you can certainly look on Shorsharet's website or give us a call and we can give you that information. I'd like to now pose some questions to our panel, questions that we received prior to the event. And I guess we'll start with you, Ms. Morales. The question is how do I learn about copay assistance from pharmaceutical companies?
So the fastest way to find out is if you know what drugs you're being prescribed or what drugs that you're taking, is to find out who the makers of those drugs are. And when you find out who makes the drug, is to actually go to their website and look for pharmaceutical assistance programs. There are also two other ways that you can find out this information across the board instead of for a specific company. You can go to NCI's website, the National Cancer Institute, cancer.gov, and they have a new search tool for financial assistance, including prescription drugs. And then there's also the cancer support community has a guide called Frankly Speaking, Coping with the Cost of Care. And in the back of that guide is a list of all the pharmaceutical companies and the contact information for their pharmaceutical assistance program. And then Google is also a fantastic tool.
Great, thank you. Another question for you, Ms. Morales, is how does one communicate with their doctor's office when there's a delay in payment from the insurance company, and will some doctors waive their fees?
So I think the best way to handle communicating with your provider is to communicate. So a lot of people don't actually let their doctor know what's going on in terms of payment or their provider, and to actually have an open dialogue. And so if an insurance company is taking a long time to process a payment, your providers can also be resources in that regard, and they can call your insurance company to follow up to see what's going on with a particular payment if you haven't gotten any response back. Because, there's human error involved, and it's sometimes bureaucratic, and it can be challenging. So maybe someone miscoded something on your bill or sent the bill to the wrong fax number. Things can happen. So it is a good idea to stay on top of it and to pay attention to what's going on and to keep open lines of communication with your provider. And then tell me again the second part of the question.
Are there times when the doctors will waive their fees?
So if you find yourself in a circumstance where your insurance company has only paid a portion of your bill, or you don't have insurance coverage, or for some reason you can't pay part of your bill, a lot of healthcare providers will negotiate with you. So they'll either, you can ask them to potentially reduce the bill or to write off a portion of your bill. And then in a worst-case scenario, if they say no, and they're not willing to work that out with you, they may be willing to negotiate a payment plan. So if you maybe have a $10,000 bill, there's no way you could pay that $10,000 immediately, but maybe they would be willing to let you pay $100 a month, for an extended period of time so that you could pay them that bill. But I've found that even large hospitals and small providers are willing to negotiate payment plans because they'd rather have some money than no money and try to go after you in collection.
Thank you. Mr. Herman, can you get disability insurance after diagnosis?
Well, disability insurance is not actually my field.
Okay.
Disability insurance isn't actually my field. With regards to receiving Social Security disability, obviously you need the diagnosis. In my experience with long-term disability carriers, that would probably be one of the things that they would look at in underwriting and making a determination on whether or not the disability is something that they want to cover. If you do, however, file and set up a insurance, more often than not, they will grant the disability, but they will pretty much carve out whatever your present diagnosis is, any potential future diagnosis that you might have as a result of this diagnosis, so that if your diagnosis is breast cancer, ovarian cancer, lung cancer, whatever kind of cancer, they'll say, if you hurt your back, you can get disability for that, but you're not going to be able to get it for this, and it's not likely that even exorbitant premiums would get you the disability for a condition, assuming they're willing to underwrite it.
Okay. And is there a difference between qualifying for short-term versus long-term disability?
Yes, short-term disability is a program that's usually offered through the states. I know that in my experience in New York and New Jersey, if you look at your if you look at your pay stubs, there is a deduction that's taken for short-term disability. Some companies will handle the short-term disability through an insurance company. So your employer will go with a Unum or a Northwestern Mutual or any of the larger insurance companies, and they administer the short-term disability. Sometimes they'll then also administer any long-term disability benefits, which are also private paid policies. If you don't have it through your job, well, obviously the short-term disability, it's virtually mandated. It's honestly, it's de minimis money. It's a few $100s a week. But there are employers that bump that up, that supplement it, and there are employers that, for the first 6 months of a condition, might even pay your salary, take back whatever the disability amount is that is paid out, and just pay you the balance. But those are very, very fact and case and employer specific.
Okay, and the last question we have for you, Mr. Herman, is how do you qualify disability if you have private insurance?
You're talking about long-term disability. Long-term disability, assuming that you have it through a job, and something that I omitted is if you go to a job with a diagnosis, or rather you're employed by somebody and have been previously diagnosed, because it's a group plan, everything I said before probably doesn't apply, and which is great news. It means that if you go someplace, they can't pull you out and identify you and say, no, you can't get insurance because you had cancer and now you're trying to go out on disability again because of cancer. They will try, but usually that is something that can be overcome just by the policy, the way it's written. I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
How do you qualify for disability if you already have private insurance?
Okay, so in order to receive long-term disability, you file. In order to receive Social Security disability, you file. Most policies now, in order to save money on the hit, on the financial obligation of paying out, have a paragraph saying if you are eligible for any kind of state-administered disability or retirement or workers' compensation or railroad or Canadian insurance or any government insurance benefit, they get dibs on it. That means they take it. So if your monthly benefit from a long-term disability carrier is $5,000 and Social Security, your monthly PIA, the index benefit that you're eligible for is $1,200, in a case like that, the insurance company is going to say, well, Social Security is giving you your $1,200, and of the $5,000, you're going to get $3,800 of that. At the end of it, you're still there with $5,000, so it's not a terrible thing. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, and this is very important for anybody that is considering representation, is receiving long-term disability and wants to file for Social Security disability. Number one, they make you file. And the insurance companies, not only do they make you, but they subtly encourage you to use their representatives. They have contracts with these representatives in order to pay less for the disability, the payout to an attorney or a representative. The thing that you have to remember is that these insurance companies and the firms, the organizations, the advocacy groups that they're utilizing, they may say that there's a Chinese wall. They may say that there's a separation between what the long-term disability insurance carrier is providing and not what they know and what these people know for disability. It's not there. They will be tripping over themselves to give the information to essentially their employer. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're receiving long-term disability, you are obligated to file for Social Security, find somebody else to represent you. They're not going to make you use the Unum or the Allsup or the dozens at this point national companies that do this. Use somebody local, whether it's somebody in your state or somebody in your geographic region, but somebody that knows the local offices, knows the judges, and at the end of the day, when you win your case with Social Security and the insurance company knocks on the door and says, please pay us back, they will deduct whatever your attorney charges you in order to get that amount. So if your attorney charges $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, whatever the amount is, and you receive a lump sum check of $30,000 from Social Security, you don't owe $30,000 to the insurance company, you owe $25,000, which it essentially means that you have nothing to lose by using an attorney, a local attorney, or somebody that's of your choosing. And my personal experience is when the insurance company, Northwestern or whoever, contacts me and asks for the information from my client, I don't really trip over myself to give them that information, particularly because sometimes the information that I have in my possession is not going to help the case, and is certainly not going to help them when they do their invariable and frequent review of the case. I don't have an obligation. I view it as work product.
Thank you. Ms. Cole, when thinking about financial planning, what are the most important documents to keep in your file? And if,
Oh.
talking, Mike, thank you.
Sorry. I think when you need to keep your, when you're trying to get all of your papers together, is that what you mean by keeping everything? What's most important? I think to be able to, as I mentioned before, have the contact information for where all of your accounts are and who you're working with, because then if you're missing anything, you'll be able to contact those organizations directly, and they can get you any statements or account information that you may not have. But otherwise, to track any of your accounts anywhere, all they need basically is your date of birth and social security number. And they'll verify it over the phone and your home address. But I think really the most important thing is to have a list of all of your accounts, where they're held, who you're working with, and those account numbers, and have all of that in one place, and then it's easy to track everything.
Great, thank you. Also, are there ways to set aside money to accumulate savings during this financial stress?
I think while you're going through a health crisis, I think it's very difficult to be setting any funds aside. If you're still working and you can still afford to be contributing to your 401ks, that's obviously a great thing to do. That's money that hopefully you're never going to touch. But making active savings while you're going through a health crisis, I think, could be very difficult. Look, what we always try and have our clients do is to make sure that they're saving before any of this happens. So you're not hit with something and scrambling to make sure that you have enough to pay your bills. That's always the best, being proactive before anything happens is always the best thing. And setting up regular savings plans, again, through your retirement accounts, after-tax savings, the automated savings plans, those are always the best things to do. But I think it would be very difficult while you're going through the crisis to be setting aside regular funds.
Great, thank you. And we only have time for one last question, and that is going to go to Ms. Sherrills. The woman asked, should she think about divesting her money if she's living with a chronic illness? Would that help in her being able to get financial assistance if she has fewer assets?
Okay. Financial assistance, I assume we mean need-based financial assistance that would be available to somebody who really has depleted their assets significantly, if not completely. That's a very difficult question to answer because it really depends on a million things. The reality is that Medicaid assistance or SSI, like was touched on earlier, these kinds of need-based government programs that pick up basic care needs and residential care needs are such unique. I don't know really that would be applicable here. Again, there are many government subsidies out there for people with disabilities, but I don't really know specifically what this circumstance is. It's very difficult to speak to that globally. I apologize, but I don't know if anybody else can say it differently.
Mr. Herman, can you address that?
Very briefly, in Social Security, in supplemental security income, the Social Security Administration will look at your assets. If you have divested them legitimately, and this is from my experiences, it's obviously not black letter or explicit law on this, but in my experiences, if somebody has assets and they legitimately divest them, they pay back family, they separate themselves from the money for medical bills or expenses or whatever, what have you like that, and then they need to file for supplemental security income or are otherwise eligible for the Medicaid, then there is less likelihood of a look-back period, or the look-back is, oh, well, yeah, you spent your money legitimately. Typically, though, if somebody is just moving the money to somebody else so that it's not in their account, if it was in the account last month and it's not in the account this month, Social Security is going to wonder where it went, and in cases like that, there will be a look-back period. Having said that, I know there are organizations and there are companies that have mastered the art of divesting of assets and resources to make people eligible for Medicaid and SSI. I imagine that they are legitimate. I have no opinion about them. I don't use them, and I don't really make recommendations to people on that issue. In truth, though, for the most part, when somebody comes to me eligible for supplemental security income, it's because they have already exhausted their assets legitimately.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, spend down, which is the concept of divesting, really, the legal term for divesting here. Again, unless you need residential services, the SSI, the supplemental security income, is really not going to resolve these problems. It's really a last resort here. This is not something that's going to provide you with the answer, I don't think, I would say. That's why I was a little, the question is not necessarily one that will solve the problem here or help significantly, unless you need residential care.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, I'm sorry, one last question. After having filled out all these financial assistance applications, any tips?
Tips on filling out the
No,
financial...
this is to Ms. Shaganoff
Any general tips?
about completing the financial assistance applications. Any shortcuts?
Unfortunately, there aren't so much shortcuts. I would say a lot of the financial assistance applications ask for the same information, monthly income and expenses, as I had said before, doctor's notes, biopsy scans, things like that. So if you kind of have a sample application handy, if you will, that really speeds up the process with completing other applications. So that's
Okay, great, thank you. I want to thank our panelists for really being able to lay out such a complicated issue. This evening began with us hearing from the women calling into Sharsheret and listening to their concerns about financial health. So our journey continued obviously with the focus groups and with tonight's discussion. Our next step is to develop a toolkit for women to use in navigating the healthcare and financial systems, and a transcript of tonight's discussion will be included in the kit. We will also be enhancing our online resources on Sharsheret's websites, providing additional information and links to relevant organizations. I would like to remind you to please complete the evaluations. As I said earlier, all of our programs are driven and enhanced by the feedback that we receive from you. We would like to continue this dialogue with you, so stay connected with us. You can reach us at our office at 866-474-2774, and you can visit our website at www.sharsheret.org. Follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. I really want to thank all of you for participating in tonight's conversation, to our experts, to the women who have been talking with us about this issue, and for those of you who are joining us this evening, both in person and on live stream. And we are looking forward to continuing this mission to better understand what action can be taken to improve financial health and to help us feel more empowered as we all confront these challenges. So thank you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.